There are moments in history where brilliance meets tragedy, where the pursuit of knowledge takes humanity to the edge of the abyss. Tonight, we step into the extraordinary, complex life of J. Robert Oppenheimer, a man whose genius changed the course of history forever. Born into privilege but burdened by an insatiable curiosity, Oppenheimer was a figure of contrasts. A pacifist who led the creation of the deadliest weapon ever known, a man celebrated as a hero yet ostracized as a pariah. His life was a tapestry of groundbreaking science, moral conflict, and personal anguish. As you jog through the stillness of the morning or wind down in the quiet of the night, let his story guide you, a tale of intellect and ambition, triumph and remorse, light and shadow. Let us begin where every story starts, not with the bombs or the trials, but with a curious child in the bustling city of New York whose love for the stars would lead him to change the world. This is the story of J. Robert Oppenheimer. Segment 1. The Early Years. Robert Oppenheimer was born on April 22, 1904, in the bustling city of New York, a metropolis alive with the sounds of industry, culture, and change. His family's wealth placed them among the city's elite, but their roots told a different story. The Oppenheimers were Jewish immigrants from Germany, a family that had overcome hardship to establish a life of comfort and success in the United States. Robert's father, Julius Oppenheimer, embodied the classic immigrant success story. Arriving in America at the age of 17 with little more than ambition, he quickly climbed the ranks of the textile industry. By the time Robert was born, Julius owned a thriving business, importing luxurious fabrics and fine garments. Despite his business success, Julius was a deeply thoughtful man, devoted to philanthropy and the arts, a passion he would pass on to his son. Robert's mother, Ella Friedman, was no less remarkable. A painter trained in the European tradition, she brought creativity and refinement to the Oppenheimer household. She was known for her discerning eye and a love of classical music, filling their home with the works of Beethoven, Brahms, and Bach. Ella's quiet, artistic presence would leave an indelible mark on Robert, shaping his appreciation for beauty and intellectualism from an early age. The Oppenheimer home on Riverside Drive was a haven of culture and learning. Their apartment was adorned with Ella's paintings, European art, and shelves overflowing with books on literature, science, and philosophy. It was a world where the pursuit of knowledge was celebrated, a perfect environment for a child of immense curiosity. From an early age, Robert displayed signs of exceptional intellect. While other children played with toys, he immersed himself in books. By the age of 5, he was already learning Greek and Latin, and his fascination with the natural world quickly became evident. When he was 10 years old, he joined the New York Mineralogical Club, astonishing its members with his profound knowledge of minerals and geology. It was here that he delivered his first scientific lecture, a detailed analysis of the local rock formations. The audience, mostly adults, was captivated by the boy's confidence and depth of understanding. Robert's letters to prominent scientists during this time revealed not only his curiosity but also his determination. He corresponded with geologists and mineralogists across the country, asking probing questions about their work and sharing his own observations. His passion for science wasn't just a hobby, it was a calling. Robert attended the Ethical Culture School, a progressive institution in Manhattan founded on the principles of intellectual rigor and moral responsibility. The school was a perfect fit for a child like Robert, who thrived in an environment that encouraged curiosity and critical thinking. His teachers quickly recognized that he was no ordinary student. One described him as a child of fierce concentration, capable of delving into complex subjects with an intensity that was almost unnerving. He excelled in nearly every subject, from mathematics to literature, often outpacing his peers and even his teachers. His essays on philosophy and poetry were so advanced that they were sometimes mistaken for the work of graduate students. But brilliance often comes with a price. Oppenheimer's peers found him enigmatic and difficult to approach. He was intensely shy, often retreating into his own thoughts. His classmates described him as distant, a boy who seemed more comfortable in the world of ideas than in the company of others. At recess, while other children played games, Robert could often be found sitting alone, reading or pondering the mysteries of the universe. Yet, for all his isolation, there was a warmth to Robert that few people saw. He loved storytelling and had a knack for reciting poetry, often quoting passages from the likes of Homer and Shakespeare. His fascination with literature was as deep as his love for science, and he frequently combined the two in his writing, weaving poetic descriptions of natural phenomena into his essays. His family played a crucial role in nurturing his mind. Every Sunday, the Oppenheimers hosted intellectual salons in their home, inviting scholars, artists, and musicians to discuss ideas over dinner. These gatherings exposed young Robert to a world of thought far beyond his years. He listened intently as guests debated the works of Goethe, Einstein, and Freud, absorbing their insights like a sponge. His father, Julius, encouraged these discussions, often challenging Robert to think critically and defend his ideas. By the time Robert graduated from the Ethical Culture School, his path was clear. He was destined for greatness. He was accepted to Harvard University, one of the most prestigious institutions in the world, where he planned to study chemistry. But even as he prepared to leave home, his parents worried about his intense focus and solitary nature. Would he find his place in the world outside the intellectual cocoon of their home? As Robert packed his bags for Harvard, he left behind a childhood defined by brilliance and isolation, stepping into a world where his intellect would both define and challenge him. The seeds of his extraordinary future had been sown, but the journey was just beginning. Segment 2: The Scientist Emerges. As Robert Oppenheimer stepped onto the campus of Harvard University in 1922, he was no longer just a prodigy, but a young man on the brink of greatness. At 18 years old, his intellectual appetite was insatiable, and Harvard provided him with the ideal stage to explore the full extent of his abilities. Oppenheimer pursued physics with a relentless fervor. To him, it wasn't merely a field of study, but a lens through which he sought to understand the universe itself. His approach to learning was both broad and deep. While he specialized in physics, he simultaneously immersed himself in philosophy, French literature, and even Eastern mysticism, gaining fluency in Sanskrit so he could read ancient Hindu texts like the Bhagavad Gita in their original form. His professors were astounded by his ability to connect seemingly disparate disciplines, using poetry and philosophy to inform his understanding of scientific principles. He graduated summa cum laude in just 3 years, a feat that required an almost inhuman level of dedication. Oppenheimer's schedule was punishing. He took 6 courses per semester, attended lectures, conducted research, and still found time to write essays that blended science with literary flair. Yet, beneath his academic triumphs, a storm was brewing. His peers admired his intellect but often found him aloof, even arrogant. Harvard's social scene, with its clubs and fraternities, was alien to someone like Oppenheimer, who preferred solitude over socializing. Even in his successes, he felt a gnawing sense of inadequacy, a theme that would haunt him throughout his life. After graduating from Harvard in 1925, Oppenheimer crossed the Atlantic to study at Cambridge University in England. There, he worked under the legendary physicist J. Thomson, the discoverer of the electron and one of the towering figures of early 20th century physics. But Cambridge would prove to be a crucible for Oppenheimer, not just academically, but emotionally. In the hallowed halls of Cambridge's Cavendish Laboratory, Oppenheimer's brilliance seemed to falter. He struggled with the hands-on experimental work required in Thomson's lab, his natural inclinations leaning far more toward the abstract world of theoretical physics. For the first time, his intellect seemed insufficient to bridge the gap, and the resulting frustration began to take its toll. Compounding his academic struggles were his deep feelings of isolation. In a foreign land, surrounded by peers who were more socially adept and confident, Oppenheimer felt like an outsider. His letters to friends and family during this time paint a picture of a young man wrestling with self-doubt. He described himself as an unmitigated disaster and a failure, words that seem unfathomable given his towering intellect. But the most infamous incident during his time at Cambridge revealed the depths of his emotional turmoil. Frustrated by a professor's dismissive attitude toward his abilities, Oppenheimer left a poisoned apple on the professor's desk, an act of desperation and anger that could have had dire consequences. The situation was diffused before it could escalate further, but it left an indelible mark on Oppenheimer's record. He narrowly avoided expulsion, and the episode hinted at the darker, more volatile side of his personality. This incident was not just a youthful outburst, it was a cry for help. Oppenheimer later admitted to battling episodes of depression during this period, a mental state that both fueled and hindered his genius. For a man who demanded perfection of himself, failure, or even the perception of failure, was almost unbearable. Recognizing that his strengths lay in theoretical physics rather than experimentation, Oppenheimer made a life-changing decision. He moved to Germany, which at the time was the epicenter of scientific innovation, to study at the University of Göttingen under Max Born, one of the leading physicists of the age. It was here, in an environment that valued abstract thinking and intellectual rigor, that Oppenheimer found his footing. At Göttingen, he immersed himself in the emerging field of quantum mechanics, a revolutionary branch of physics that sought to describe the behavior of particles on the smallest scales. The scientific world was grappling with questions that defied classical understanding, and Oppenheimer was determined to be at the forefront of this intellectual revolution. He published several papers on quantum theory, earning respect from his peers and mentors alike. His work demonstrated not only a profound understanding of the subject, but also a creativity that set him apart. Max Born himself described Oppenheimer as a man of considerable charm and intellectual ability, though he noted that his student's personality could be prickly and intense. Oppenheimer's time at Göttingen also introduced him to some of the greatest minds of his generation, including Werner Heisenberg, Wolfgang Pauli, and Paul Dirac. These interactions sparked collaborations and debates that would shape the course of modern physics. In 1927, at the age of just 23, Oppenheimer earned his PhD from Göttingen. His doctoral thesis was a groundbreaking contribution to quantum mechanics, and it firmly established his reputation as one of the brightest young minds in physics. His journey had taken him from the quiet halls of Harvard to the cutting-edge laboratories of Europe, and he was now ready to bring his brilliance back to the United States. But even as his scientific career flourished, Oppenheimer remained a man of contradictions. He was a genius who could unlock the secrets of the universe but struggled with his own inner turmoil. He was a scholar who revered knowledge yet often felt disconnected from the world around him. These complexities would define his life and his legacy as he prepared to take on challenges that would test not just his intellect but also his humanity. Segment 3. The Manhattan Project. In 1942, with the world gripped by the devastation of World War II, a shadow loomed over the Allied forces. Reports of Nazi Germany's progress toward developing an atomic bomb sent shockwaves through the scientific and military communities. The stakes could not have been higher. A race to harness the power of the atom, a force that could alter the course of history itself. Amid this race, Robert Oppenheimer emerged as the unlikely leader of what would become the Manhattan Project. Though brilliant, he was not the most obvious choice. His academic background was steeped in theoretical physics, not large-scale engineering or military operations. Yet, his unparalleled intellect, combined with his ability to inspire and unite diverse personalities, made him the man for the job. The Manhattan Project was unlike anything the world had ever seen. A secret operation of staggering scale, it mobilized tens of thousands of people, billions of dollars, and the brightest minds of the era. Oppenheimer became the director of the project's scientific hub at Los Alamos, New Mexico, a remote, barren desert that would become the birthplace of a new era. At Los Alamos, Oppenheimer faced an extraordinary challenge: to assemble and manage a team of geniuses, each with their own egos, specialties, and priorities. Among them were titans of science like Enrico Fermi, Richard Feynman, and Edward Teller. It was said that Oppenheimer had a unique gift for bridging gaps between disciplines. He could speak the language of chemists, engineers, and physicists alike, weaving their efforts into a cohesive whole. Under his leadership, Los Alamos became a hive of relentless innovation and frenetic energy. Yet, the weight of the task was immense. The scientists worked against an unforgiving clock, driven by the belief that their success might save millions of lives by ending the war. But behind closed doors, many, including Oppenheimer himself, wrestled with the moral implications of their work. They were not merely building a weapon. They were unlocking a force that could destroy civilization. In the scorching heat of the New Mexico desert, the pressure mounted as the project entered its final stages. Months of calculations, experimentation, and sleepless nights culminated in an event that would forever alter the trajectory of human history. On July 16, 1945, at 5:29 a.m., the first atomic bomb was tested in the barren expanse of the Jornada del Muerto desert. The test was codenamed Trinity, a poetic yet haunting title that reflected both the scientific ambition and the existential dread of the moment. Oppenheimer and his colleagues stood several miles from the test site, their eyes fixed on the steel tower that housed the bomb. As the countdown reached 0, a blinding flash lit up the pre-dawn sky, brighter than the sun. A shockwave rippled through the desert, followed by a deafening roar that echoed for miles. A towering mushroom cloud rose into the heavens, an unmistakable symbol of humanity's newfound power. As his peers cheered and marveled at their achievement, Oppenheimer stood silent, his mind consumed by conflicting emotions. The scientific triumph was undeniable, a feat of unparalleled ingenuity and collaboration. Yet, in that moment, he could not ignore the profound moral weight of what they had unleashed. In later interviews, Oppenheimer would recall the words that came to him in that instant, drawn from the ancient Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." It was a moment of both revelation and reckoning, a recognition that this creation, born of intellect and ambition, carried the potential for both salvation and annihilation. The Trinity test was hailed as a success, and just weeks later its grim legacy would be cemented in the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Oppenheimer had fulfilled his mission, but at what cost? The once idealistic physicist who marveled at the universe's mysteries now found himself at the center of a global moral quandary. He had unlocked the atom's power, but he could not control how it would be wielded. The Manhattan Project was more than just a scientific endeavor. It was a turning point in human history. It redefined the relationship between science and society, power and responsibility. And at its heart was Robert Oppenheimer, a man who embodied both the brilliance and the burden of his creation. Segment 4. The Fallout. With the war over and the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki lying in ruins, Robert Oppenheimer's role in the Manhattan Project transformed him into a figure of both acclaim and controversy. Across the United States, he was hailed as the father of the atomic bomb, a man whose intellect had helped bring about the end of World War II. But Oppenheimer was not one to revel in triumph. As he stood before President Truman in a meeting just months after the war, he confessed, "Mr. President, I feel I have blood on my hands." The comment left Truman deeply unsettled, and Oppenheimer's relationship with the political world grew increasingly strained. As the Cold War began to take shape, the United States found itself in another race. This time, to build the hydrogen bomb, a weapon even more destructive than the one dropped on Japan. Oppenheimer, however, opposed this new escalation. He argued that the development of such a weapon would lead to a dangerous arms race and advocated instead for international control of nuclear power. To many in Washington, this stance was seen as idealistic, perhaps even naive. To others, it was an outright betrayal. In a world gripped by fear of communism, Oppenheimer's past came under scrutiny. His ties to leftist intellectuals, his brief flirtation with communist ideologies during the 1930s, and even his friendships became fodder for suspicion. The once celebrated scientist was now viewed through a lens of paranoia. In 1954, during the height of McCarthyism, Oppenheimer was summoned to a security hearing that would become one of the most infamous episodes of his life. The hearings were less about uncovering the truth and more about discrediting a man whose views had become inconvenient to the government's agenda. The hearings were brutal. Oppenheimer's integrity, loyalty, and even his personal life were dissected and questioned. Colleagues who had once admired him now testified against him, some out of genuine fear, others out of self-preservation. Stripped of his security clearance, Oppenheimer was effectively exiled from the halls of power he had once dominated. It was a public humiliation. Once a symbol of American ingenuity and triumph, Oppenheimer was now a pariah, a man whose genius had been overshadowed by political games and personal vendettas. To many, his fall from grace was a chilling reminder of the cost of dissent in a time of fear. In the years that followed, Oppenheimer retreated into a quieter life. He became the director of the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, where he returned to his first love, theoretical physics. But the weight of his past never left him. He spent countless hours reflecting on the choices he had made, the lives his work had altered, and the world his intellect had helped to shape. When asked about his role in creating the bomb, he did not seek to absolve himself. In some sort of crude sense, he once said, "The physicists have known sin, and this is a knowledge which they cannot lose." His words echoed the deep moral conflict that had defined his life, a conflict between the pursuit of knowledge and the consequences of wielding that knowledge without limits. In 1963, nearly a decade after his public disgrace, Oppenheimer received the Enrico Fermi Award, a prestigious honor granted by the U.S. government. To many, the award was a symbolic gesture, a quiet acknowledgement of his contributions and an attempt to restore some of his dignity. But for Oppenheimer, the wounds of betrayal ran deep. The recognition, though appreciated, could not erase the years of humiliation or the burden of his conscience. In his final years, Oppenheimer became a figure of quiet contemplation. He spent much of his time at his family retreat on the island of St. John in the Caribbean, far from the political and scientific arenas that had once defined him. There, surrounded by the natural beauty of the sea and sky, he found a semblance of peace. But even in those moments of serenity, the shadows of his past lingered. Oppenheimer died in 1967 at the age of 62, his body succumbing to throat cancer, a likely result of years of exposure to radiation during his work. He left behind a legacy as complex as the man himself, a symbol of brilliance, ambition, and the haunting moral dilemmas that come with pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. Robert Oppenheimer's story is not just one of triumph or tragedy. It is a cautionary tale about the power of science, the responsibilities of those who wield it, and the delicate balance between genius and conscience. His life reminds us that while knowledge can illuminate the darkest corners of the universe, it can also cast shadows we may never escape. Segment 5. Oppenheimer's Love Life. J. Robert Oppenheimer, while being a man of deep intellect, his personal life was equally complex, marked by passionate affairs, emotional turbulence, and intense relationships. His love life offers a window into the human side of a figure often remembered for his scientific achievements and moral struggles. In his early adulthood, Oppenheimer seemed more consumed by his studies and intellectual pursuits than romance. But beneath his reserved and often aloof demeanor was a man who craved connection and intimacy, albeit in unconventional ways. He often fell for women who were as intellectually vibrant as they were emotionally challenging, creating relationships filled with both inspiration and strife. One of the most significant relationships in Oppenheimer's life was with Jean Tatlock, a psychiatrist and Communist Party member who was both brilliant and deeply troubled. The two met in the mid-1930s, and their relationship was marked by intense passion and frequent heartbreak. Jean was independent, politically active, and fiercely intelligent, qualities that captivated Oppenheimer. She became a profound influence on his life, introducing him to leftist political ideas and fostering his interest in literature and philosophy. However, their relationship was far from stable. Jean struggled with depression, and Oppenheimer's demanding career often pulled him away from her. Despite the volatility, he remained deeply attached to her, and even after their romantic relationship ended, they maintained a connection. Tragically, Jean took her own life in 1944, an event that haunted Oppenheimer for the rest of his life. Some historians suggest that his visits to Jean, even after he was married, reflected the unresolved emotional bond he shared with her, a connection that never truly faded. In 1940, Oppenheimer married Catherine Kitty Puning, a biologist with a fiery personality and a complicated past. Kitty was no stranger to controversy. She had been married 3 times before meeting Oppenheimer and had a reputation for being headstrong and fiercely independent. Despite their shared intellect and interests, their marriage was far from idyllic. Kitty's blunt demeanor often clashed with Oppenheimer's introspective nature, and her struggles with alcohol added tension to their relationship. Yet, their union was not without moments of tenderness. Kitty became a source of stability for Oppenheimer during the turbulent years of the Manhattan Project. Though their relationship was strained by the immense pressures of his work and his lingering feelings for Jean Tatlock, Kitty herself was not a passive figure in their marriage. She was a formidable partner who stood by Oppenheimer during his public fall from grace in the 1950s. Her unwavering support during his security hearings showcased her loyalty, even as their marriage remained a complicated partnership. Oppenheimer's love life was a reflection of his inner turmoil, a man torn between duty, intellect, and emotion. His relationships were as multifaceted as his personality, revealing a deeply human side to the celebrated physicist. They were marked by love and loss, connection and distance, joy and tragedy, painting a picture of a man who sought meaning not just in the stars, but in the hearts of those around him. Ultimately, Oppenheimer's love life was not one of fairy tale romance, but a journey of intense highs and devastating lows. It showcased his vulnerability, his longing for connection, and his constant struggle to reconcile the demands of his mind with the desires of his heart. Through the lens of his relationships, we see not just a brilliant scientist, but a deeply flawed, profoundly human man, navigating the complexities of love in a life filled with extraordinary challenges. Segment 6. Oppenheimer's lesser-known contributions, the genius beyond the bomb. When we think of J. Robert Oppenheimer, most of us immediately associate him with the Manhattan Project and the creation of the atomic bomb. However, what often gets overshadowed in the glare of that destructive achievement is his immense and wide-ranging impact on theoretical physics, some of which laid the groundwork for concepts that are crucial even today. These contributions, while not as flashy as his work on the bomb, highlight the depth of Oppenheimer's genius and the true scope of his influence on science. 1. Predicting black holes before they were popularized. Years before the term black hole even existed, Oppenheimer was one of the first scientists to theoretically explore the concept of collapsing stars. In 1939, alongside his student Hartland Snyder, he co-authored a groundbreaking paper titled On Continued Gravitational Contraction. In this work, they described how a massive star, after exhausting its nuclear fuel, could collapse under the force of its own gravity to form a singularity, a region of space-time where density becomes infinite. This research essentially laid the foundation for the modern understanding of black holes, yet Oppenheimer's role is rarely discussed in popular science. At the time, the idea was seen as a theoretical curiosity, rather than a physical reality, and it wasn't until decades later that black holes captured the public imagination. Oppenheimer's early insights into the process of stellar collapse, however, were crucial in shaping what we now know about these cosmic enigmas. 2. The Born-Oppenheimer approximation. In the realm of quantum mechanics, Oppenheimer's name is immortalized through the Born-Oppenheimer approximation, a fundamental concept in molecular quantum mechanics. Developed in collaboration with Max Born in 1927, this approximation simplifies the complex equations governing the behavior of molecules by separating the motion of nuclei and electrons. Why is this important? It forms the basis for much of modern chemistry and physics, allowing scientists to predict molecular behavior with greater precision. This approximation is used in everything from designing pharmaceuticals to understanding how materials behave at the atomic level. And yet, how many people realize that Oppenheimer, the same man who led the Manhattan Project, also contributed to something so essential in quantum chemistry? 3. Quantum electrodynamics and his impact on particle physics. Oppenheimer was a pioneer in quantum field theory, particularly in the nascent field of quantum electrodynamics, QED, which describes how light and matter interact. His early research on electron-positron theory and energy states of electrons in atoms contributed to what would later become the foundation of QED. In particular, Oppenheimer's work explored how electrons behave in high-energy environments, paving the way for later developments in particle physics. While he didn't win a Nobel Prize, several of his theoretical contributions formed the basis for later breakthroughs that did earn that honor for others, like Richard Feynman and Julian Schwinger. 4. Cosmic rays and high-energy astrophysics. Another lesser-known contribution was Oppenheimer's study of cosmic rays, high-energy particles from outer space that bombard the Earth's atmosphere. He investigated how these rays interacted with atomic nuclei, helping to explain some of the fundamental processes that occur in high-energy astrophysics. Though his work in this area was overshadowed by his later endeavors, it was instrumental in developing our understanding of particle physics at extreme energies, a field that continues to be at the forefront of modern astrophysical research. 5. Contributions to nuclear physics beyond the bomb. Long before the Manhattan Project, Oppenheimer's theoretical insights helped shape nuclear physics as a field. He was among the first to calculate the quantum tunneling effect in nuclear reactions, a phenomenon that explains how particles can tunnel through energy barriers rather than going over them. This concept is crucial in explaining processes like nuclear fusion in stars, the very process that powers the sun and other stars in the universe. His work here wasn't just theoretical. It had practical implications for understanding how energy is produced in stars and how elements are formed in the universe through nucleosynthesis. 6. Oppenheimer's vision of interdisciplinary science beyond his specific scientific contributions. Oppenheimer's greatest invention may have been the way he envisioned the role of science itself. He was a vocal advocate for interdisciplinary collaboration, bringing together physicists, chemists, mathematicians, and engineers during the Manhattan Project. This approach was revolutionary at the time and has since become the standard for tackling complex scientific challenges. Oppenheimer also believed that science should serve humanity, even if his greatest achievement, the atomic bomb, complicated his legacy in this regard. After the war, he championed the peaceful use of nuclear energy and pushed for international collaboration to prevent the misuse of scientific advancements. Segment 7. The relationship between Heisenberg and Oppenheimer, collaboration, competition, and conflict. The intertwined lives of J. Robert Oppenheimer and Werner Heisenberg provide a fascinating lens through which to view the collision of genius, ideology, and personal ambition in the 20th century. Both men were titans of theoretical physics, and their paths crossed at pivotal moments in history. Their relationship was a blend of respect and rivalry, shaped by their towering intellects, differing personalities, and the political upheaval of World War II. Oppenheimer and Heisenberg first encountered each other in the 1920s during the golden age of quantum mechanics. At the time, Heisenberg was already a luminary in physics, known for formulating the groundbreaking uncertainty principle, which revealed the limits of our ability to measure quantum systems. Oppenheimer, though brilliant, was still making a name for himself in theoretical physics. During Oppenheimer's time in Germany, where he worked with luminaries like Max Born at the University of Göttingen, he was exposed to Heisenberg's ideas. Heisenberg's work on matrix mechanics, a cornerstone of quantum mechanics, deeply influenced Oppenheimer. There was a mutual respect between the two, as Oppenheimer admired Heisenberg's intellect and contributions to physics, while Heisenberg recognized Oppenheimer's potential as a rising star. The relationship between the two men became deeply complicated during World War II. While Oppenheimer became the scientific leader of the Manhattan Project, spearheading the development of the atomic bomb for the Allies, Heisenberg found himself at the heart of Germany's nuclear program. At first glance, it might seem like these two scientists were engaged in a personal race to harness nuclear power. However, the reality was more nuanced. Heisenberg's role in the German atomic bomb project remains controversial. Some historians argue that he intentionally slowed down Germany's nuclear efforts, either out of moral hesitation or scientific miscalculation. Others believe he genuinely tried but failed due to a lack of resources and clear direction from the Nazi regime. Oppenheimer, meanwhile, worked with unrelenting focus to ensure the success of the Manhattan Project. In his mind, there was no room for error. The Allies could not afford to lose the race to the bomb. A pivotal moment in their relationship occurred during a mysterious 1941 meeting in Copenhagen between Heisenberg and Niels Bohr, a mutual mentor to both men. The details of this meeting have been hotly debated, but it's widely believed that Heisenberg hinted at his involvement in Germany's nuclear program. Years later, Bohr shared notes suggesting that Heisenberg had been less interested in halting the Nazis' efforts than in subtly bragging about his role. While Oppenheimer was not directly involved in this meeting, its fallout impacted his perception of Heisenberg. To Oppenheimer and his colleagues, it reinforced the belief that Heisenberg was a willing participant in the German war effort, making him an intellectual rival and a political enemy. After the war, Oppenheimer and Heisenberg found themselves on opposite ends of the political and scientific spectrum. Oppenheimer became a global figure, known for his leadership during the Manhattan Project and his later opposition to the hydrogen bomb. Heisenberg, on the other hand, struggled to rehabilitate his reputation, often defending his wartime actions and explaining why Germany's nuclear program failed. When the two met at scientific conferences in the late 1940s and early 1950s, their interactions were reportedly strained. Heisenberg was frustrated by the shadow cast over his legacy by the success of the Manhattan Project, while Oppenheimer viewed Heisenberg with a mix of skepticism and pity. Their feud wasn't just political, it was also intellectual. Heisenberg's approach to physics was deeply mathematical and abstract, while Oppenheimer's style was more intuitive and holistic. These differences occasionally led to disagreements over the interpretation of quantum mechanics and other scientific theories. One of the most notable scientific clashes occurred during debates over the hydrogen bomb. Heisenberg expressed skepticism about its feasibility, while Oppenheimer initially supported its development before later opposing it on moral grounds. Their differing stances highlighted their contrasting priorities. Heisenberg was more concerned with scientific challenges, while Oppenheimer wrestled with the ethical implications of their work. Despite their tensions, the relationship between Oppenheimer and Heisenberg is a testament to the complexity of human interactions in times of moral and scientific crisis. Both men were flawed geniuses, grappling with the profound implications of their work in physics. Oppenheimer's legacy is forever tied to his role in creating the atomic bomb, a source of both his fame and his torment. Heisenberg's legacy is more ambiguous, caught between accusations of collaboration and claims of quiet resistance. Their relationship, marked by mutual respect and enduring conflict, reflects the broader story of science during one of history's darkest periods. In the end, Oppenheimer and Heisenberg were two sides of the same coin. Brilliant scientists thrust into an era where their intellects could change the course of humanity, for better or worse. Their lives serve as a poignant reminder of the double-edged nature of scientific progress and the moral complexities faced by those who wield it. Segment 8, Legacy. J. Robert Oppenheimer died in 1967, but his legacy endures, a legacy not only defined by the monumental achievement of creating the atomic bomb, but by the complexities, contradictions, and moral ambiguities that accompanied it. Oppenheimer's life is a paradox. A brilliant physicist who unlocked some of the universe's most profound secrets, yet a man burdened by the knowledge of the immense destructive power he had helped to unleash. He was, at once, a visionary and a tragic figure. Oppenheimer's intellect and ambition drove him to the precipice of scientific discovery, but it was in that very pursuit of knowledge that he became entangled in a web of ethical dilemmas. He famously quoted from the Bhagavad Gita after witnessing the first successful test of the atomic bomb in 1945, saying, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." These words, spoken in the wake of the explosion at the Trinity test site, capture the essence of his internal conflict, the realization that he had brought forth an era of unimaginable destruction. Oppenheimer's transformation from a brilliant idealistic scientist to a figure embroiled in the politics of war was profound. During World War II, His leadership of the Manhattan Project, America's top-secret mission to build an atomic bomb, was a remarkable feat of organization, intellect, and determination. Under his guidance, a team of some of the most brilliant scientists of the time developed a weapon that would change the course of history, yet the cost of this achievement was high. The bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki claimed an estimated 200,000 lives, and the world was irrevocably altered in their wake. Despite his role in the creation of the atomic bomb, Oppenheimer was not a man driven by a thirst for war. In fact, after the bombings, he became a vocal advocate for international control of nuclear weapons, seeking to prevent future proliferation and avoid global catastrophe. This shift from wartime scientist to peacetime advocate demonstrated the depth of his internal struggle. He recognized the potential of nuclear energy for both constructive and destructive purposes, and he spent the rest of his life wrestling with the consequences of what he had helped create. His stance on nuclear weapons ultimately made him a target during the Cold War, a period when fear and paranoia dominated American politics. In the early 1950s, Oppenheimer's opposition to the development of the hydrogen bomb, coupled with his earlier ties to left-wing groups, led to his public disgrace. The U.S. government revoked his security clearance in 1954 in what many viewed as a politically motivated move. The man who had once been hailed as the father of the atomic bomb was now regarded with suspicion and distrust by many of his own countrymen. But even in the shadow of this fall from grace, Oppenheimer's intellectual legacy remained intact. His contributions to the development of quantum mechanics, his early work on the theory of cosmic rays, and his later thoughts on the implications of scientific discovery have continued to influence generations of scientists. His deep, philosophical approach to science, believing that the pursuit of knowledge should always be accompanied by ethical responsibility, resonated long after his death. After his passing, Oppenheimer's legacy was reassessed, and his contributions to science were ultimately celebrated. He became a symbol of the complex relationship between science and ethics. His life serves as a reminder of the dual-edged sword of progress. Scientific advancements can bring great benefits, but they can also unleash forces that we may not be able to control or fully comprehend. Perhaps the most poignant aspect of Oppenheimer's legacy is the moral question he left behind. What price are we willing to pay for knowledge? In his case, the price was the suffering of countless innocent lives, but the price of progress is often more subtle. Oppenheimer's story compels us to ask ourselves, as we continue to push the boundaries of science, technology, and knowledge, are we fully aware of the consequences, and are we prepared to live with them? Oppenheimer's life is a study in contradictions. He was a scientist who sought truth, yet he lived with the weight of the destruction his truth brought. His legacy, however, is not defined solely by the atomic bomb, but by his struggle to understand the power he had unleashed, and his desire to reconcile scientific achievement with moral responsibility. In this he remains a cautionary tale, but also a hero, one who dared to reach for the stars, even if it meant facing the darkness that lay within. His legacy endures not only in the science he helped shape, but in the moral dilemmas he left us to ponder as we move forward into the unknown. As you reflect on Oppenheimer's story, let it be a meditation on the complexities of life and the choices that shape our world. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the whispers of the universe.